After a pastor is brutally murdered in his own home, authorities identify the man they say is responsible. We look at who this man is, the hunt for him, and his extensive criminal background on this edition of the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast.
Taking you behind the investigation, this is the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast. I'm Amy Cutler, joined by senior investigative producer Cody Lillich. We're talking about a story that grabbed headlines involving the murder of a pastor in a small Arizona community. Pastor Bill Schonemann was found dead in his New River home on April 28th. Authorities did not say much about his death other than that he was found in his bed covered in blood.
Now, to his neighbors, he was known as Pastor Bill. Soon after the murder, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office said there was no threat to the public. But we didn't know why that was. More than 6 weeks later, the Sheriff's Office held a press conference, finally providing the name of the suspect, Adam Sheafe, saying the 51-year-old was in custody in Coconino County. That's when we started to piece it all together.
Yeah, investigators say Sheafe broke into a home in Cave Creek, then went to New River, where they tell us he murdered Pastor Bill. Then he came back to that Cave Creek home where he stole a truck and made his way to Sedona.
And Amy, that part in Cave Creek, you actually spoke to some of the neighbors there as he just kind of seemed to blend in with that neighborhood.
Exactly right. So he had made himself at home inside a home where some folks were away at a second home in Montana. So there was no one home at the time. They tell us that he cooked himself food, specifically macaroni and cheese, that he gave himself a haircut. They actually called investigators or called 911 to that home. He was no longer there. So they said, call us if he comes back. And he actually did come back.
And so he basically made himself at home, literally, in that Cave Creek neighborhood. And talk about how it ended up from Cave Creek and he fled north.
So neighbors tell me that he loaded the truck that was in that driveway with some of his stuff, possibly some of their stuff. And it's unclear to us why he went to Sedona, but he took that neighbor's vehicle, drove to Sedona, where he then attempted, we understand, to break into another home or car. Neighbors spotted him.
Yeah, and he had basically made his way to Sedona and started camping there, from what we understand from police. But it was just a few days after Pastor Bill's murder that there was a large manhunt that essentially locked down this Sedona neighborhood. And our Mason Carroll went to that neighborhood after this arrest was announced. And the manhunt for him essentially locked this neighborhood down, which is something rare, as officers from several agencies looked for Sheafe.
We spoke to a lot of the people who live here. None of them wanted to go on camera, but told us the entire street came out to watch as police cars, drones, and officers took over their neighborhood just over a month ago. This area backs up to rough national forest land. Because of this, we were told a drone team was deployed and used thermal imaging technology to keep track of Sheafe as he tried to escape through the brush. He was arrested when he traveled back into residential areas. One neighbor told us he heard Sheafe was camping out in this area, and Cottonwood police shared a picture of a tent they found during their search.
So we now know that that person, Sheafe, is arrested and has not been charged as of yet with the Maricopa County crime, but that is anticipated. And authorities have already said that he is the person responsible for Pastor Bill's death. And adding another layer to this already complex story, the area where this happened in Sedona is a very popular area. It's a neighborhood in the shadows of the Chapel of the Holy Cross, which is a popular spot in Sedona where many tourists have seen or have been to themselves. And we bring up religion because investigators say it's central to this investigation and say that Pastor Bill was targeted because of religion. But we found out that Sheafe had other targets as well.
At this time, we have information that suggests Sheafe acted alone, and there was no further danger to the community from Adam Sheafe. The information we have has indicated that the motive was religious in nature and that there were a number of future victims planned, some of those in Arizona, and that he had taken action in furtherance of those additional crimes. We have been in contact with those identified victims, and we are investigating or assisting with those incidents as well.
I know you mentioned that these victims were selected at random, or at least Pastor Schonemann was targeted at random. Any indication on how he went about choosing these victims? Like how he found Pastor Schonemann?
Yes, there's some indications of how he discovered that information, but we can't share that right now.
Do you know roughly how long he'd been planning these attacks?
No, I can't say that at this point. We do know that from the time he left until the time that he committed the first murder was less than a month. The time he left his home state.
Authorities also did not elaborate on that home state other than to say that Sheafe had an extensive criminal history, both here in Arizona and in that home state. So we began digging, and Cody, you found quite the history of crimes for Sheafe.
Yeah, that's right. And you heard from the authorities, they did not elaborate a lot on anything really as far as his background, what that home state was, what kind of crimes he had served time for. So that's really when we started digging and looking into public records for Adam Christopher Sheafe, and found that his criminal history dates all the way back to the earliest we can find it is in 1999, where he was charged for corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant and with a sentencing enhancement of great bodily injury, domestic violence, for an incident that happened in California. He pled guilty to that in January of the next year, was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 4 years in prison on the enhancement that served consecutively. And then he had probation following that. Fast forward a few years, he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon other than a firearm. This was also in Orange County, California. He pled guilty to that in 2004, was sentenced to 270 days in jail and 3 years probation there as well. Then 10 years later, authorities in Oro Valley near Tucson issued an alert saying they wanted this man, Sheafe, for choking a woman and holding her against her will at a home in Oro Valley. A notice was sent out to local media. Our sister station in Tucson actually covered this, put his picture out there as being wanted. He would end up turning himself in and be arrested for that in Oro Valley near Tucson. Just 1 year later, we found criminal records in the Corrections Division in Nevada that found that he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for some burglary-related crimes, including burglary, attempt or use of personal identifying information, and possession of stolen property. This all happening in Clark County, Nevada. And 4 years after that, there was a massive federal case that he was involved in that include bank fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Those were federal charges where he was sentenced to 94 months in federal prison and served a little more than half of that. He served his federal prison time, we've learned through the Bureau of Prisons, at a facility in Beaumont, Texas. And then he was sent to home confinement and was released in September 2022 after we're told he completed a substance abuse treatment program through the Bureau of Prisons.
That is a really extensive criminal history. I'm wondering, the Arizona charges were easy enough to find, but as you were digging into California and Nevada, sort of what was going through your mind?
It just seemed like there seemed to be more and more. And honestly, some of these records are older, so they were not as easy to find. Some systems don't put all of their records digitally and kind of fall off after a few years, so it was a little harder to find. And honestly, there are some that we have not been able to verify, that there may be even more to kind of fill in this timeline that we have not been able to verify at this time. So it was kind of just, once they said home state, that was kind of our challenge. Okay, where is that home state? And we believe it to be California. but he did spend time in the Nevada Department of Corrections for that burglary-related crime in Clark County in 2014. And after that, it seems like he did make his way to Arizona, and you found out a little bit more about his family and his Arizona connection, right?
Yeah, so I had the chance to speak with his father, Chris Sheafe, who tells me that he lives in Tucson. His mother lives in the San Diego area of California. So it seems that he's kind of gone back and forth between California and Arizona. Most recently, it seemed that authorities seemed to suggest that he was living in California, maybe staying with his mom. His father wasn't quite sure why he would be in Cave Creek or Sedona. There didn't seem to be any connection that we were able to find. But what set Sheafe out on this path? We spoke with his father, who says his son was involved in a terrible motorcycle accident, and that led to a drug addiction. He went on to say that his son has struggled with that for decades. His father explained that he'd spoken with his son just a couple of weeks ago. He was already in custody in Coconino County.
The first time I had a chance to talk to him was he was there, and he was very open and explained to me that he was very sorry about things that had occurred, but he was more than willing. He wasn't going to hide anything. He said, just tell the police to come and talk to me, and I'll sit them down, tell them everything that I've done. And as far as I know, that's what he's done.
And it was interesting because the sheriff's office wouldn't tell us. We know that they interviewed him, but we don't know if he was forthcoming or what exactly he told them about what he did or didn't do.
Yeah, and that's one of the many things that they, didn't describe in that press conference, and they're kind of keeping things close to the vest regarding the Maricopa County investigation because they don't want to release much more, they seem to indicate, until they can secure an indictment, and that seems to be the next case or next step in this case. But what was it like? We spoke with the dad. What was it like talking to him about such a significant development in his son's life? And also, it seems like he's been in trouble with the law in the past, and now this has popped up. What was it like talking to him about this?
Yeah, his father was really pretty forthcoming. He was not aware of any possible murder charges that he might have been involved in. He said that basically they don't discuss that. He was very aware that when his son would call him from, a jail or a prison, that those calls are recorded. He didn't want to get his son into any more trouble than he was already in. But he said that he has tried over the years to get his son help. He's been in various treatment programs. He said something that kind of stuck with me, that basically you can love your child, but you don't necessarily have to love the actions that they take or the decisions that they make.
That's very well said. And, there was one other thing. We talked about the religious components to this investigation. We've seen the mugshot of Adam Sheafe, and he had a tattoo across his neck that we understand said Yahweh. And the sheriff says it doesn't appear that the suspect even knew Pastor Bill. And so that's one of the mysterious things about this whole case. And to learn that there might have been a list of other potential victims, it is just kind of baffling to think about how this could have materialized, and how did he find these victims or potential victims. And, Pastor Bill was a pastor in New River, a very small community that, not many people really know about unless you're just driving by or anything like that. So it's just kind of baffling of how he selected these people and how he did what he is accused of doing.
Yeah, and that was part of the frustration from that press conference. We were really hoping that they had mentioned that they were going to provide all this detail. So we were really hoping that they were going to lay out their case. And they mentioned hit list, but then they wouldn't go into any details of who was on the list specifically, or how extensive the list was, or how they found the list, or where he developed that information. So it's you understand that they're trying to develop their case. They don't want to put all the information out there, but there's just so many questions.
And one of those questions you asked the dad was about that tattoo and the fact that authorities say that this was religiously motivated. Here's what he told you about the tattoo specifically.
Adam is a very intelligent person. Adam became extremely interested in the Old Testament. He read it extensively, and part of that process became his interest. We weren't excited when we learned that he'd done it, but was to have the tattoo. It means God. It means that he's directly related to God, and he wanted to let people know that that was his allegiance.
His father said that his son had just recently gotten that tattoo, and as you heard there, he was not thrilled about that, but he sort of emphasized the fact that his son was very smart, and this was an interest that he had taken up.
In the interview, did the dad describe his upbringing, or did he grow up in a religious household, or what was his fascination that brought on his interest in the Old Testament? Did he come from a religious background, or was there any indication in the interview that he did?
No indication that he had grown up in a religious background at all. So it's unclear why he had this fascination with the Old Testament. His dad said that he had taken an interest in Hebrew, which was sort of interesting, and that he had read the Old Testament several times. He was really well versed in the specifics of it, but it was unclear why he would start reading it or what led him in that direction.
And we talked about that so-called a hit list or target list. Maricopa County Sheriff's officials weren't really too detailed about it, wanted to keep it close to the vest, but said that they were working with those people that were listed as far as notifying them and making them become aware of this. But they didn't identify who it was. Were they other religious figures in our community? Were they just random people? We don't know. But, it just brings up the fact of how did he choose these people? And in the press conference, it was revealed that he had taken, and they didn't go into too many details, but he took some kind of action against another supposed victim or potential victim, but something happened in that effort. They didn't go into details of what that was or if it was thwarted, that kind of thing. But they did make it clear that he had tried something else, but didn't go into what that something else was. But the things we don't know right now, how did he decide on these people? What was in his mind to decide to go on such a mission? Why were these people chosen? Why Pastor Bill? I mean, if you were going for prominent religious figures in our community, he would be pretty lower on the list. Being a pastor for a very small congregation, very small church in New River, I mean, it boggles the mind when you're going through the checklist here of, would you go for the largest church in town, or, how did he settle on New River? And
yeah.
that's the puzzling thing to me. And why Arizona?
I know. It's really strange. It didn't seem like initially there were some reporting that in talking to Pastor Bill's family that maybe Pastor Bill had helped him at some point. And so, but it seems like authorities are saying, no, there was no connection. They didn't know each other. So that makes you have even more questions, right? Why target this stranger?
Yeah, and that seemed to be a plausible idea when this all first came out of, maybe he did, reach out and try to help this man who was down on his luck, just released out of prison years ago. On a fresh start, maybe that was a possibility as to what happened, and something went wrong in the friendship. But when the authorities said that this was not someone he knew, that was a big surprise in this case.
Yeah, and then the fact that he was in Cave Creek before the murder of the pastor was also very telling, because it leads you to believe that there was maybe some planning, because just to get from Cave Creek to New River was just a 15-minute drive. So it was pretty close, So you have to wonder, is that part of the plan, that he was going to kind of set up shop in Cave Creek and then, murder the pastor and then move on to Sedona? I mean, it's a lot of questions.
Yeah, because it does bring up another question. You look at where he was captured, and in the Sedona area, in the shadows of the church. So was that a target of his? We don't know. So it just brings in another question upon another question upon another question in this incredibly complex case that authorities, they knew this was going to be complex from the start. And the sheriff saying it was, one of the most notable and bizarre cases that he's worked in his decades of law enforcement. And they brought in federal law enforcement from the get-go. So yes, at the press conference, we had officials from the FBI saying that they were assisting in this investigation. So there's lots to uncover in this investigation, and still a lot more that we don't know.
Yeah, but I will tell you, from talking to neighbors in that New River community, there is a lot of relief, because the sheriff's office had made clear that there was no ongoing threat to the community. But I got to tell you, talking to them, they were really concerned. Pastor Bell was this well-known, well-liked person in their community, and all of a sudden he's gone, and under these really terrifying circumstances.
Because New River and Cave Creek, these are smaller areas. The impression that you got, these are people who, know their neighbors, and, there's a sense of safety and security in these areas, and not ever an idea that something like this could happen.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Right now, Sheafe is charged in connection with the Cave Creek and Sedona incidents, but not in connection with Pastor Bell's murder. The sheriff's office says that will be coming. We'll continue to follow it closely. Thanks for joining us.
The Arizona's Family Investigates podcast, hosted by Amy Cutler and produced by Cody Lillich, and a production of Arizona's Family 3 TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.